Jonathan.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Nice to have you here in Groningen. You are a bass player and a poet. Can you tell me what it is playing the bass, and especially the double bass? What does this mean? And why do you do that?
Wow, that's a tough question. Well, the instrument came to me kind of by coincidence because my grandfather used to play double bass, and as a kid I never considered it to play bass myself, or I don't know, why would I? I mean, it's not an obvious choice for a kid, and I mean, I started having piano lessons, I had violin lessons for some years and played various instruments, and always got a bit frustrated and never really had the feeling that this is like really what I want to do. And I don't know, then I quit my piano lessons and didn't really do music for a while, and at some point I was in the house of my grandfather and I saw the double bass, and suddenly it was really obvious to me, like, yeah, actually I want to play the bass. And then I started lessons on the bass, and that was finally, it just felt right from the first moment. It's like, yes, this is what I want to do.
What did your grandfather say about that?
Well, he was really happy and enthusiastic about it and supported me. And I mean, he lived in a different city, so I didn't see him so much, but once in a while on vacation I went there, and he was always really curious and supportive. And also at some point he bought a second bass for himself, and then his main bass that he played for many years became my bass, and so I think of him pretty much every time I play, because I have this heritage of this instrument with me, which is very nice.
Okay. Well, you are playing very thick strings, 4 strings on the double bass. Is there some relationship with playing a cello for you?
No.
No.
I also like playing the cello. I mean, I'm not trained as a cellist, but whenever I find one, I really like the instrument. And now I sometimes regret that I picked up the double bass, because the cello just seems like a bit more practical version of my instrument. And when I started playing the bass, I was a kid and my mom was driving me around, and I didn't really have to consider practical issues. But now, traveling all over Europe and playing concerts in different places, I must say it's a drag having such a big thing to carry around.
I was wondering about the strings, because I think you need extra strength and power in your hand to really play it. I saw a lot of guitarists playing guitar, and while they play, then a string suddenly makes pling and it's gone. Do you also have something like that with a bass string when you play, that a string is just going to nirvana in the middle of your playing?
It has happened a few times, but it doesn't happen as much as for guitar players, I think. But also, I mean, the strings I use are very solid and very strong, as you said, very thick strings. And I mean, my setup developed over the years, and I got more and more in this direction, because I feel like what I really enjoy about the bass is a very acoustic, very heavy sound with a lot of attack, and it's something that, I mean, especially when you're playing in bigger ensembles with other musicians, volume is always an issue, and of course you can use an amplifier, but it's not the same if you play soft and then rise it to a higher volume level with an amplifier, or if you just play louder. And my idea is that, I mean, it's not always possible, but as much as possible I want to play acoustic, and I want to get as much sound out of the instrument as possible, so that's really what I'm going for, and that's the sound I'm looking for, so that's how this setup developed.
Where's your instrument coming from?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I use 2 instruments now, the old bass from my grandfather and another one that I bought a few years ago because the old bass is a bit too precious to always carry it around, and I tend to be a bit worried about it, so the other one is more my travel bass. But the old bass that used to be my grandfather's is a German bass from Neunkirchen, which was built around the 1950s. And my travel bass is a very cheap and crappy bass made in China that I bought second-hand for 300 euros, and it's amazing. And because I'm traveling so much, I end up playing that bass much more than my grandfather's bass. So in the end, I also try and look at things in a way that it's really not about how expensive or fancy or prestigious your instrument is, but in the end it's about what you make of it. And I think if you're a good enough musician, you can sound good on any instrument, and that's what I'm trying to prove myself also every time I pick up that bass.
Yeah. And how is it to travel with this huge instrument?
Well, I mean, I have a car, and most things when I'm on tour I travel by car. That's really the only option. I mean, if I really just go somewhere for one concert and I don't need to take an amplifier, then I mean, I much more prefer going by train because it's much more relaxed and you can use the time to read or compose or listen to music or do other things. But as soon as I'm out for a few days and I have like other luggage with me, I have to take an amplifier and other equipment, and it's the only way to go in the car. So I spent many hours on the highway.
Yeah. And how is it for you to play with that huge instrument? I mean, it really has a huge body. What kind of relationship do you have with this extra body? Does it become one with you, or how can you describe that?
Well, I would say it is a very intimate and personal relationship, because I mean, it is, as weird as it sounds, this piece of wood with some metal is like, I mean, it is just an object, but at the same time, I mean, with this object I spent many hours a day for years, and I have like, in the end, more intimate contact with this object than with any other human. And of course it's like, yeah, I know every millimeter, every small dent and scratch in every part of the body and the wood, and it's like, I mean, in a way it is an extension of myself, or it feels like, I mean, it feels very familiar and very comfortable playing this instrument. But also the physicality is really interesting, because lately I started to work a lot more in like performance art backgrounds and work with dancers and interdisciplinary, and not only be a musician but also perform in very different contexts, also more like theaters and gallery spaces, and where suddenly this bass being an object becomes much more important, or becomes a different role. Because, for example, I perform a lot in a duo with a dancer with my double bass, and I mean, she's moving in the space, but I'm also moving with the bass in the space, and at some point we noticed that actually it's not a duo but it's a trio, because the bass is almost the size of a human, and I mean, wherever you put it, it's present on the stage. You don't just put it aside and it's not there, but it's, I mean, it is very physically present.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy playing with it.
Yeah, I notice sometimes you sit while you play, and sometimes you also stand while you play. What is the difference for you to have these two situations, sitting and standing?
Well, sitting is when I'm lazy, and then, yeah, I mean, it's really just, if you play an instrument for many hours a day, it's, in the end, I think it's important to play in different positions, because you cannot really have one fixed position and work with that 8 hours a day. I mean, that's just physically not healthy, or maybe not possible. So it's just varying different positions, and yeah, whatever feels best in the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you studied at the Prince Claus Conservatorium in Groningen. and also in Philadelphia and some other places as well. Can you tell me what you learned there the most, what you still use today in the art you do? What was important for you? What did you really learn? What really give you something special?
Wow, so many things. I mean, I've been studying for so many years in so many different schools and places, and in the end, I mean, to say something general about all those experiences is that maybe I learned the most, not really from the lessons, but more from personal connections, the people I met. I mean, both teachers that I had a more close connection with, as well as the other students, and I mean, it's just amazing to see so many people who are working in the same or similar field as you are, and I mean, everybody just has a completely different approach to it, a different background, a different idea about sound, about art. I mean, art is in the end about expressing something and finding your own voice, and it's just beautiful to see all the variety around you and all the different approaches to music and performance.
Did you had some special teachers you remember with pleasure, mentors who were there?
Well, I mean, back when I was in Groningen, an important figure for me was Michael Moore, who was mainly here as a clarinet and saxophone teacher, but he also taught composition classes in different ensembles, and after some time here I got to know him and I figured out that like this is the guy I need to spend some time with, and then I took some classes with him and also outside of school started playing with him and talking a lot about music and performance, and he was definitely an important mentor for me for a long time. And then recently last year I was for one semester in Berlin at the University of the Arts, and there I had two teachers who I have very particular memories about. One is the bass player Cohen, who is a fantastic musician and a great person also, but just his history and all his experience and knowledge is very unique, because he used to be an active bass player in the United States for the last 40 years, and he played with really everyone from Tom Waits to John Zorn and Ornette Coleman, and it was very inspiring having lessons with him. And then ask him a question about songwriting, and he would just very casually say, yeah, I remember this like 20 years or 30 years ago I was in this festival and I was sitting backstage talking with Bob Dylan about this, and I was like, what? Wow. So that was really interesting, because he opened my ears to many kinds of music I hadn't heard before and many interesting approaches. And I also had another bass teacher in Berlin, who was Mark Milbauer, and that was another very particular experience, because by that time I got there I was playing the bass for maybe like 15 years already, and I had the feeling like, I mean, I'm mostly working on more like conceptual work, composition, and like what do I want to express, what is really like, I don't know, more on a meta level, but I had the feeling that like technically playing the instrument, I mean, I can do that, I've done that for many years. But Mark is someone who, he studied both jazz and classical music, and he played a lot of contemporary classical music also, which tends to be very technically challenging, and his technique is amazing. And I came to Berlin, and like every week I went to the lesson, I technically learned some skill on the bass that I didn't have before, and I would have not believed before that there's so many more things to learn about playing the bass, and that was very revealing and interesting.
Great, that's good to hear. Well, let's talk about cleaning each other. It's the band you're playing in.
Mhm.
It's a trio with Chris Hill on drums and Rieko Okuda on piano. Uh, well, I was checking a little bit what the name can mean, and I saw a lot of websites that describe animals clean each other's, like monkeys, dogs, and cats, but also humans clean each other. Can you tell me a little bit about the name of the trio?
Um, it has many aspects, and well, of course we were thinking about it for a while. And the first and most simple explanation is that it's a dedication to Venetian snares. If you've heard of it, it's an electronic music artist and producer, and this is music that all three of us really like, and it was definitely one of the inspirations as a starting point for this band, to use some patterns and ideas or the general sound aesthetics of Venetian snares, but then not in an electronic context, but in an acoustic playing situation as we do. And there's one Venetian snares track which is called Cleaning Each Other, so that is a reference and dedication there. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, the title can mean many things, and also, I mean, especially with the sound we produce, I mean, it does have this repetitive and maybe kind of meditative or trance aspect to it. And so, I mean, in Cleaning Each Other, I think there's also a strong spiritual reference about whatever, cleaning your body and your soul, and by going together through whatever process, whatever it takes. And I mean, that's also an aspect that we like about the name.
Can you tell me a little bit how you met? And how did you start the band?
Well, Rieko was one of the first people I met in Berlin, and that's maybe not coincidence. I met many people in Berlin who mentioned here or there that when they first got to Berlin, they first met Rieko, because it's hard to miss her. She's really everywhere, and I think she's the most busy and active musician in Berlin. And wow, she's amazing. I've been playing with her; it's great every time. And so we met about 4 years ago, and then I was once in her rehearsal studio, and the studio next door got free, and I was looking for a place to play, and she got me in there. So then we were neighbors in the rehearsal studio, and we just, over many years, now and then we kept working together or seeing each other. And then one day I met Chris at a concert. We were both in the audience of a concert and started talking, and we both agreed that in Berlin it's quite a common problem, because there's so many artists, so many musicians, that often it happens in Berlin that people just set up a project for 1 or 2 concerts and then it falls apart, and that there's not so many steady bands that are really working together for longer periods, but a lot of, especially the more experimental avant-garde music scene is just, I mean, everybody's all over the place, and then projects get set up and they exist for a few months and then they fall apart again. And we both kind of agreed that that is really a pity, and there's something really nice about having a band. And so we were talking and just kind of thinking, yeah, maybe we should play together or set something up if we both have this similar idea. And then it was maybe 2 weeks after that Rieko in our rehearsal studio asked me, she said, yeah, she's playing with this drummer and they want to set up a new band and maybe I would like to play with them once, and she could see me in this combination. So we set up a session, and then there was Chris, who I just talked to 2 weeks earlier, and we were talking about maybe making a band, and well, there it was. And from the first time playing together, it was just a really strong connection, and we just, without talking a lot about it, we kind of agreed on a common sound aesthetic we were going for. And it's, yeah, it's really good working with those two guys.
And what did you expect from each others for being inside this project? Was there kind of a direction already clear where it would go towards sound-wise, and like the whole setting, was it clear or was it totally open? Or
well, I would say it pretty much started without expectations. I mean, we just met to play a session together, and I think we just have a lot of music in common that we like, and we figured out, I mean, then we were talking, and yeah, what music are you listening to and what does it remind you of? And then we quickly found out that we kind of have the same references or the same ideas of music that we like, and then of course more and more we started to refine that, okay, which aspects from like different styles of music or different genres, different bands do we want to put together, and like how do we really want to sound. But it just came naturally, basically, because we all have a similar taste.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the music you play together? What is it about? Are there stories behind, or is there something you can put in words instead of just music? Can you imagine you have a singer maybe in the band, a guest singer? What would this singer think about, or would he just use his voice as an instrument, as a sound maker? But maybe you can explain a little bit about the background of the songs that are featured on the new album.
Well, first of all, I mean, in this project all the music is improvised. There's no fixed compositions, and we do rehearse and work on specific concepts or things, transitions, but more like isolated ideas and not whole pieces, and how the piece develops and what actually happens is always improvised. And I wouldn't really say that the term stories really applies, because it's, to me, our music is very abstract in the first place. It's about creating a certain atmosphere and a certain sonic aesthetic, but it's much more like, if you want to visualize it, like a abstract painting with like shapes and colors, and it is of course about composition, but not in a way like there's not really melodies that stick out, or not really a story being told, but it's more like the whole aesthetic impression of one whole set or one whole piece that we perform. And our approach is it is very much about the development and about the long-term development of a piece. So if a piece may last 20 minutes, then our idea is to not have like ups and downs all the time, but it's very much about a slow, gradual development, and building up intensity, and like using a lot of repetition to like just keep evolving. We sometimes use this image of a kaleidoscope through which you look and you turn it, and it's small particles, and they just switch places and keep forming new and new patterns and shapes with the same small ingredients, and this is kind of an aesthetic we're striving for.
Okay. Well, my question is, when you started to play together, when did you decide to make an album, and how much time did you play together to feel that you can improvise like that together, to have the same feeling, the same feeling of intimacy and all that you can share that and to really make an album of that?
I think, well, we recorded the album about a year ago, and before that we had maybe 2 years of playing together, and yeah, a bunch of concerts in different cities and places, and I mean, we all just feel very familiar around each other because we have like Rieko and Chris have another band together. I have another band with Chris, and I mean there's a lot of this trio is one group, but we're also in the same like group of friends or group of performers. So I mean we all play together a lot, also in different situations, and so that makes it really easy to work together because we live in the same environment and have the same ideas about how things go or how we want things to go. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and last year it happened that we had some concerts in Copenhagen in Denmark, where I used to live at that time. And then we just got an opportunity to record in a studio there, and we thought like that seems like a good moment to capture what we're doing.
And this album will be a vinyl album. Can you tell me why you choose to have a vinyl instead of having a CD?
We had long discussions about that, and in the end we came to the conclusion that, I mean, we all have several bands and projects and have recorded and released CDs, and our experience over the last years really is that CD sales are drastically going down, and I feel like especially, I mean, most of our audience for this project are, I would say, younger people between 20 and 40 maybe, or I mean, I don't want to be exclusive, but that's our observation from the concerts, and people who are interested in arts and performance art and experimental music. And I mean, especially those people, I think they split in two groups. There are people who really care about sound quality and who are really into or collecting records and have like a fancy stereo and are like into this kind of thing, and those people rather buy vinyl than a CD for whatever reasons. That's what's happening. And then there's the other group of people who just like the music and want to have it on their iPod or when they're traveling and whatever, and they would rather download it than buy a CD. And like nowadays most computers don't have a CD drive anymore, and I know so many people who don't even have any CD player at home. Yes, I think especially in this like target group, what's mainly our audience, I don't see so many people buy and use CDs anymore. So we decided to make it on vinyl and of course also a digital release, so it will be available on Spotify, iTunes and all the other web services.
Yeah. Can you please tell me very short what the magic is for you to play with Rieko and Chris in this band? What do they have for you very special? What really grabs you and makes you feel satisfied and happy to be with?
To me, what's really interesting about this band is that we all have actually very different backgrounds, because Rieko grew up in Japan and from early age on had learned to play classical piano, went through a very traditional classical piano education, and then she moved to the United States where she studied jazz music and got into a very traditional American jazz, and after that she moved to Berlin, and now she's really doing anything, and she's just incredibly virtuosic in any kind of style of music. I mean, it's she's very versatile, but I mean always with links back to both the classical and the jazz world. And then Chris is in many ways the opposite, because he studied to be a lawyer, and he always played music, but he was, I think, mostly involved in more electronic music, and he's working a lot as a producer and producing other people's as well as his own electronic music. And next to that he also plays the drums, but I feel he hears music with a very different ear, with the ear of a producer, and paying much more attention to like sound quality and texture and like the whole production aspect or arrangement aspect of a piece, rather than individual notes or like a technical approach to your instrument. And well, it's always hard to categorize yourself. I don't know where I'm in this picture, but somewhere else. I mean, as I mentioned before, I'm much more also into like theater and performance art, and in this way different things. So we all have very different areas where we are active, and this just comes together because we all have a similar taste in music and all like to do what we do, but still we all bring in very different colors into our music from our different backgrounds, and I think that has a lot of potential for creating interesting things.
But you use also some electronic effects for your bass. Can you tell me what you use and why you use it? What do you like about it?
Well, what I use is utterly simple and stupid. I mean, everything I use is a simple distortion pedal, and I was, I guess, always too lazy, or I don't know, maybe not interested enough, or I don't know, to like get a big effects rig. And I mean, as I also said before, mainly I'm interested in the acoustic sound of the bass, and I don't really see the point in spending hundreds of euros for many effects. But then still, it is nice to have like some way you can alter the sound. So some years ago I got this distortion pedal, and I kind of incorporated it in my setup, but I tried to use it in a very like radical and rough way, and really not just to color my sound a bit, because I'm not so interested in it. I mean, my sound is the acoustic sound of the bass, and then as a contrast I use the distortion really in as with a lot of distortion and more to play with the feedback and with like a really contrasting sound, to drastically change my sound, just to have another color available.
Okay. Can you describe for me, in your opinion, what is the most beautiful sound for you?
Maybe it's the sound of the waves on the seaside. I really enjoy that. It has something very calming and relaxing, and the way it is repetitive, but still it's natural. It's not like a clock ticking, but I mean it varies and shifts a bit, and at the same time it's very just powerful and overwhelming, the sound. And yeah.
Okay. And Well, you live in Berlin and in Amsterdam, but
Yes.
you're not from Berlin. Uh, can you tell me what grabbed you to move to Berlin?
Everybody's moving to Berlin these days. I don't know how you can not move to Berlin. No, it was just I graduated and I did my undergrad studies, as you mentioned before, in Groningen in the Prince Claus Conservatory, and then when I finished there in 2014, it was just like I had to go somewhere, and I felt that Groningen, for what I want to do, if you mainly want to work as a performing artist, then the options in Groningen are a bit limited. So for me it was clear I really enjoyed my time in Groningen, but for the future I wanted to go somewhere else, to a bigger city, and then Berlin was just the obvious choice because I'm from Germany originally, so I know the language and I kind of have an idea how things work there, and I knew few people there, and Berlin is just the art hotspot at the moment, so I thought like that's where I gotta be.
Yeah. Can you tell me what Berlin really gives to you? What is it special for you to be in Berlin? What do you find in Berlin and just there? Can you tell me about that? And also what Berlin does not give you? Is there something that you don't like about being there? Because you also live in Amsterdam, and then I would have the same questions about Amsterdam for you. What does give Amsterdam for you especially, and what not?
Well, first of all, I hate living in Berlin. It's horrible, but it's amazing at the same time. I mean, as I said, I think at this moment, if you're into like any kind of experimental arts in any field, I think Berlin is the place to be, because there, at least in Europe, that's where stuff is happening, and there's incredibly many musicians, visual artists, performers, dancers, theater makers, actors, anything, and there's so many people who live in Berlin and work in Berlin, and every night you have a choice of whatever, at least 10, 15 concerts you can go to, and there's so many exhibitions and performances, and it's just coming at you. You can, in Berlin, you can go out every night, see some incredibly amazing performance, and it's just a whole lot of inspiration you can get there, and great contacts you can make, and just to set up collaborations with other artists and meet people and try out stuff. And another thing that's great about Berlin is that it's still, even though prices are rising compared to other big cities in Europe, it's considerably cheap to live there, and there's also just free space, or spaces that are kind of easily available, where you can just easily, whatever, I know friends are coming to town and we want to perform together, play together, but it's already in 2 weeks, and then on short notice you can set up something, and maybe not a lot of audience is going to come, and it's not a big thing, but you will always find a space where you can set up something self-produced, and just to play, to just also try out work that's maybe unfinished still. You just want to give it a go and perform it somewhere or show it somewhere to see what happens with it. And it's a great, Berlin is like a big playground, really. You can do anything and play with anyone, and that's great. But that at the same time, the same thing is also the downside of Berlin, that it's there's both a lot of competition because there's so many artists and so many things happening, but also it's what bothers me the most in Berlin is that it's very restless, and it's very difficult to actually find your own space, to develop something, to focus and concentrate, because there's so much distraction. And as I said, every night there's so many things going on, and everybody's always busy, and the city is just the dimensions of the city. It's huge, and you can easily spend 1 hour on a train to just see a concert. And yeah, it's yeah. I always feel when I'm in Berlin that I'm very slow, and I can just not do so many things in a day, because just everything it takes long to get to a different part of the city and to do everything. Everybody in Berlin is always late and always busy, and it's, yeah, it has this kind of, it is very exhausting being in Berlin, and very restless, and yeah.
So this is why you moved to Amsterdam.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment I'm really back and forth every month, but I think for me Amsterdam is the perfect place to balance that out, because Amsterdam in size, it is a lot smaller than Berlin, and it's there's still a lot going on, but the art scene is considerably smaller than in Berlin, and it's more easy. Yeah, it's in the end it's always the same people doing stuff here and there, and it feels more like a family, basically. The music scene or the art scene in general, everybody knows everybody, and people are very supportive, and it's like there's less distraction, and it's maybe less inspiration coming from outside, but then at the same time it's easier to really work on one project and to have people around you take their time to support you or to talk with you and to listen with you to stuff, and like yeah, everything is a bit more relaxed, a bit.
Okay.
Easier.
Well, when I tell you sex and drugs and rock and roll, what can you tell me about that in your life?
It's happening.
Can you tell me some stories? Or at least one.
Actually, it's happening, but not so much for me. Because, I mean, in the end, it is happening when I'm not playing. I enjoy going to concerts and being audience and enjoying my life and all of sex, drugs and rock and roll I can get. But being a performing musician, that really is not your reality most of the time. Because, well, as I said, I'm driving a lot with the car. I have to get to the gig. I have to drive home afterwards. So the drugs part is already not there for legal reasons. And then sex, I don't know. With the music I play, well, I wish there were more young females in the audience, but it is for whatever reason not so much the case often. And rock and roll, yeah, I try that. That's why I have the distortion pedal.
Well, my next question goes to what you love the most about playing the bass, especially. Do you like to play more specifically sounds, or more melodies, or maybe both? Where do you go to? What do you like the most at the moment?
I would definitely say I like both. Actually, I think it always needs to be a combination of both, or at least for me personally. If I hear a concert and it's only about sound and noise without any melodies, I usually get bored pretty quickly. I mean, there's some artists who can really do such interesting sounds that it's worth listening to that for more than 5 minutes, but most of the time that's not really the case. But at the same time, I am very interested in sounds and sonic textures, and I feel like I'm only playing melody, especially if you're like in a music education and you study jazz music somewhere. I feel like most of this education is about harmony and melody, and that's all you learn and you practice, and you kind of get taught like you're a good musician if you know everything about harmony and composition and melodies. And I see so many musicians coming out of those schools, and they really, that's all they use and all they can do, and there's very little variation in dynamics, in volume, and sound texture, and especially also through extended techniques, natural harmonics, other unusual ways of playing the instruments. I mean, you can really enrich your palette of sounds you can use, and I think it's a pity that so many musicians I hear don't really explore that field. And I think what to me personally makes an interesting musical performance is a combination of both, to both have melodies and harmonies, but also be inventive and creative with the sounds, and not just take it like, okay, I put the finger there, that's the sound my instrument makes, but I mean, you can shape sounds in so many different ways and use so many different textures. And I think both should be contained in musical practice.
Yeah. Well, I have a question about being a German jazz player, a German improvised musician. Well, Germany has a rich history in jazz and still is very active. Even they have a lot of improvised music and musicians coming from Germany, especially also from former East Germany. What is your opinion about Germany and jazz and improvised jazz? Is it a strong situation? And do you feel German when you play?
No. Okay, that's a clear no. Well, I don't know. I mean, of course I know about the history and some of the big names from the German jazz and improvisation scene, and I heard a lot of people live and on records, but I feel, for me personally and the scene I see myself in, the people who surround me, that it more and more does not really matter where you are or where you're from. Because I mean, if I look at all the people I play with, both in Berlin and Amsterdam, there's very few Germans and also very few Dutch, but more than anything else, those music and art scenes, they're international, and it's people from all over the world, and they use the city or a certain space to meet because for one or the other reasons there's the whatever environment that works for that, and the facilities and possibilities somehow. But I mean, most of the people I know in Berlin, they're not like, yeah, we play German jazz, and they don't identify with that at all, but they all come from different backgrounds, and they come together to do something that's very independent from the country and national context.
Okay. But do you teach?
No.
Why not?
Actually, I would like to teach, because many of my friends teach, and most of them tell me that they like it a lot and that they find it very inspiring and get a different approach to their own instrument by teaching it to someone else. And I mean, it seems like something I would like to do, but practically at the moment that's not possible for me, because I'm traveling so much. And I mean, usually when you teach, most students want weekly lessons, and at the moment I'm performing and traveling so much that it's not possible for me to be every week in the same city.
Yeah. But even you're not teaching, but can you give an advice to young double bass players? Young double bass player who just start and they want to go that path, maybe your own path. What advice can you give them? How to deal with problems and what to look for to make it a little bit more easy?
Very generally, I would say just keep exploring your instrument, and of course, especially as a beginner, I mean, there's some technical things how you traditionally play the instrument, and of course it is, I would recommend anyone to learn that, but don't stop there. It's what they teach in the schools and what's written in the books is not everything, and I think the bass is such a versatile instrument. You can, I mean, it's actually, if you just look in the traditional way, the bass is used in so many different contexts, in classical orchestras, in jazz bands, in all kinds of more experimental settings, and but it doesn't stop there. I mean, I think you can do so much with the instrument, and I think it's the most important to try what really fascinates you personally as a bass player in your instrument.
Okay. Well, if you had the possibility to put people together in your dream band, who would be in your dream band? If money is not a question and you can travel and whatever to bring the people together, who would be in your dream band to play and perform together?
That's funny, because in fact I feel like I did that 2 months ago. No, really, because I mean, it is a project and an idea for a group of performers that I had for a long while, and then 2 months ago I graduated, I did my master's, and around that I used that occasion to put up my dream band and set up a few other concerts around it. We recorded an album, and yeah, so for that I invited musicians from Copenhagen and Berlin and Barcelona and from all over the world to come here for a week and do this project with me. And that's maybe not the answer you expected. I mean, probably we're looking for names of, I want to play with Bob Dylan, which I guess would be great, but I feel the longer I'm in this whole music, art world, whatever, I see more and more, I mean, I think it's very natural for, especially as a beginner or when you're not so much in the music scene, then you have your big heroes, and like, I want to play like Ron Carter, or I want to play with Miles Davis, or, well, it's not possible. Who's still alive? I don't know who people want to play with these days, but I mean, you have your big heroes, and yeah, one day I want to be on stage with, like, in jazz, whatever, Joshua Redman or Brett Melda or something, and of course I've been there, I mean, not on the stage, but in my thoughts of like, yeah, I would be in this band. But I got to understand more and more that, like, I mean, yeah, but like, I guess Brett Melda or Joshua Redman or whatever did, or Kurt Rosenwinkel, or to put out some big jazz names, I mean, they grew up and they studied somewhere and they had their friends and they made their bands with their friends, basically, and that's why those bands sound so good and work so well, because, I mean, it just developed, and I think, like, I mean, I can enjoy that as a listener, but would I really add something to that if I was the bass player from... I doubt it, I must say, and I feel like, I mean, I have my own group of people around me who are stellar musicians and performers, and I think, I mean, it's now up to us to become the next generation of performing artists that people, I don't know, I mean, it's not that I care that people look up to it, but more in the sense, like, I mean, I feel like with my generation and my people, yeah, it's up to us now to build our careers, and maybe my dream band is the famous people of tomorrow, maybe, or not. we'll see.
And can you just tell me in a few words how you are and who you are when there's no music around? When you are private, when you have when you relax, do you have vacation sometimes? What are you doing? What kind of person are you? Do you have hobbies other than related to music and sound? Maybe.
That's something that I find increasingly difficult to answer in my life, because the more you're performing and traveling, the less time alone at home you have, obviously, and especially, I mean, then sometimes, of course, yeah, I have a tour of a week and then I have like 4 or 5 days in between, but then is that really who I am? I mean, then I do laundry and do some grocery shopping and sleep a lot, and then I go out again for the next thing, and I don't know, but when I really have time, I mean, I enjoy cooking a lot and being just like in the music, also experimental with the food, and it's a funny observation, but I see that most of the musicians I play with, or the people I find interesting performers, are also very good chefs, and I think there's some link that, I mean, it's, if you care about art, then maybe you also care about food or whatever. At least I do. Yeah. Lately I started writing a lot of text. I'm very interested. I got very interested in poetry, and I'm reading a lot of poetry and writing poetry, and it's nice. For so many years I've only dealt with written music and sheet music, and now I'm kind of coming back to words and trying to explore what they can say as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks a lot.